Good morning and welcome to the Mid-Maine Chamber of Commerce and Thomas College Business Breakfast Series. My name is Kim Lindloff. I'm the President and CEO of the Mid-Maine Chamber and a proud Thomas alum. It's my pleasure to welcome you here this morning. Before we begin our program, I'd like to take a moment to thank our 2020 Business Breakfast Series sponsors. They include AT&T, Cross Insurance, New Dimensions Federal Credit Union, Nicholson, Mishu and Company, CPAs, O'Donnell, Lee, McCowan and Phillips, attorneys at law, Sheridan Construction, and our print media sponsor is the Morning Sentinel. Our radio sponsor is 107.9 The Mix, and our video sponsor is Kennebec Savings Bank. This month, we're also pleased to welcome an additional sponsor, Seacoast Security. I'd like to remind you to please turn off your cell phone in consideration of our guests, and please don't forget to complete the evaluation form at your table. I also want to take a second to welcome our newest chamber members. They are Assistance Plus, Cove Central Communications, Hobby Lobby, and Renewal by Anderson. I want to thank our spotlighters that we had today, GHM Insurance Agency, and the Warehouse. They are giving out door prizes, so at the end we will be picking for a gift basket from GHM. It also includes some of their glasses, a $25 Damon's gift card, and a $25 The Elm gift certificate. We have a gift certificate to Cancun Mexican Restaurant, Dunkin' Donuts, and the Warehouse is featuring a gift basket including strawberry gummies, salve, coffee, and CBD dog treats. Some upcoming events. Tonight, actually right in this room, the Central Maine Growth Council is holding Central Maine Tech Night in conjunction with Thomas and the Harold Alfond Institute for Business Innovation, sponsored by CGI and Valley Beverage. Please join them each month for drinks, pizza, network, and some of the hottest issues in technology. This month's featured speaker is Patrick Breeding, a biomedical engineer who co-founded Dermarius, a skin care company which utilizes lobster proteins. The event will be held right here, 5 to 6:30. There's a ribbon cutting at 4 p.m. on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th at Amici's Cucina as we open its new bar lounge area. Please join us. Also, I'd like you to note we have a change in our schedule. We originally had our business after hours scheduled for next Wednesday. It is now next Thursday, March 19th at 5:30 p.m. It's at the Alfond Youth and Community Center and co-hosted by Maine General Health. It's sponsored by Northern Light Inland Hospital, Kennebec Savings Bank, and Valley Beverage. Our next business breakfast, again here in this room, is entitled Recruitment Marketing Got Talent, and it's on April 9th at 7:15. Syed Eastman of jobsinme.com and jobsintheus.com will offer branding and recruitment marketing tips to help you attract the right candidates. Our speakers today are the Wellness Connection CEO, Patricia Rossi, joined by Daniel Walker, an attorney with Pretty Flaherty. They will share insights on navigating the new cannabis market. When you are asking questions of our speaker, please wait until we're able to get a microphone to you so that your question can be captured on video. And I want to also thank Crossroads TV. They tape and rebroadcast these breakfasts, and they're also posted on YouTube. So now I will introduce our speakers. Patricia Rossi is a seasoned executive and current CEO of the Wellness Connection, Maine's leading group of medical cannabis operators with a workforce of 80 employees and generating over $15 million in revenue annually. Rossi manages 4 state-licensed dispensaries as well as state-of-the-art operations designed to exceed the highest production standards for cultivation, processing, and manufacturing. Under her leadership, Wellness Connection has consistently been named one of the top 20 cannabis companies nationwide. In 2017, Rossi was named America's most important woman by Cannabis Business Executive. That same year, Rossi earned a distinction as one of Maine's top 5 female CEOs by Maine Biz. In 2016, she ranked number 3 as most influential female executive within the industry. She also launched the Mark Bushy Compassion Program, dedicated to providing free cannabinoid therapies to patients with terminal illnesses. Rossi is a regular keynote speaker on topics ranging from experiential marketing, entrepreneurship, or cannabis policy impact, and is also a sought-after advisor to early-stage cannabis enterprises across the United States. Rossi is passionate and results-oriented, is a passionate and results-oriented executive with vast global experience in the areas of business management, team building, marketing, communications, and branding. A visionary leader who fuses creative, commercial, and corporate experience to achieve breakthrough results, she has established herself as an industry leader. In 2019, she was named a Power Woman of Cannabis by a national trade association. Born in Paris, France, oh, we love Paris, Rossi has lived in Maine since 1999 with her husband and their 2 daughters. Dan Walker is going to be joining Patricia. Dan is a partner and the chair of Pretty Flaherty's Government Affairs Group, focusing his practice on advocating for clients before the Maine legislature, executive branch, and other governmental agencies. Dan's specialty is regulatory issues, including election and campaign finance law, PACs, and campaigns. Dan represents the largest medical marijuana dispensary in Maine and has spent a great deal of time negotiating the new marketplace. Prior to joining Pretty, Dan served as legal counsel for the Speaker of the Maine House of Representatives. He also completed 2 clerkships under judges in the Utah Court of Appeals. He represented Microsoft for 2 years in a private antitrust case. Dan is active in multiple civic and charitable organizations and has published articles on election law and media law. He has delivered lecture presentations for several organizations, including the Maine State Bar Association, the Maine Association of Nonprofits, and the University of Maine School of Law. Dan has played a critical role in shaping Maine's very successful cannabis laws in the state. He will share some points of his vast knowledge with us in today's presentation. Please join me in welcoming Patricia and Dan.
Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here today, bright and early, to talk about cannabis. Cannabis is always a very fascinating and interesting topic. We're going to try to make it lively. Dan and I, as you can hear from our bio, know a thing or two on the topic. We're going to do everything we can to stay on time. We've been told to stay precisely on time. We can talk about this industry for hours and hours. I started in 2011. I think there should definitely be a multiplier. For all of you in this room that are entrepreneurs, I mean, being an entrepreneur in the cannabis industry is being an entrepreneur on steroids, because everything you know does not apply, period. That's the principle number 1. So everything you can think will happen, could happen, will definitely happen to you. So what we put together is not like a formal presentation. It's more taking a step back and giving you a little bit of perspective. There's a lot happening. It's hard to keep track on what is currently being discussed nationwide in Maine. So giving you a little bit of perspective, and most importantly, try to anchor everything we say in facts. There's a lot of debunking stereotypes. I mean, internet is great, but everything on internet is not necessarily true. So we're going to try to bring a little bit of perspective. Are we there yet? So this is, this industry was born a long time ago. Maine was a pioneer, was once rated the best medical program in the nation, and in 2016, the referendum passed legalization of marijuana. And I feel pretty much like this guy is suspended in the air with his flag for the last 4 years, because when you're a leader and you have 90 employees, you need to chart a path. And for us, legalization means the greater access, scaling up operations, and licensing is only happening now 4 years later. So it's really a challenge on how much, what do you do? This is this tug and pull of how much do I invest, how much do I wait, or maybe I should not wait, what do I do? So it's, how do you chart a path in a totally uncharted course? So are we there yet? Finally, yes, it will happen this year. Licensing will be there. So a little bit of the perspective, and I know there's in this room some members of the former administration, which was not really cannabis friendly, so nothing really happened over 8 years. The new administration under Governor Janet Mills' impulse is finally tackling this market, bringing more regulation, and in 1 year, more is happening than has ever happened in the last 8 years. So we're going to catch up and give you a little bit of perspective. Let's start by in the US. Okay, it's still federally illegal, but look at this map. There's 74% of the population that are having access to marijuana in some forms. Some states have medical-only programs. Others have started to fully legalize it. 74%. I mean, the train has left the station. To those that say, oh, one day this will all go away, I do not think so, because the economic stimulus and impetus is like there.
And just go back for a second. So if you look at the Northeast too, it's almost entirely legalized in the Northeast right now, and we're very close. And so if you think about just regions and markets, pretty soon New England is just going to, we're going to have to talk about regional. If it doesn't become legal federally, we're going to have an entire region that's legal, and so we're going to have to talk about how do you cross borders and those types of things.
So I was hinting as this is the timeline of how things happen in Maine. 1999, one of the first in the nation to legalize medical marijuana. Again, Maine was a pioneer. 2009 was the referendum that created the system as the medical system is built as of now, which is a mix of caregivers and dispensaries. There's a lot of confusion about the semantics of what is a caregiver, what is a dispensary, what does this mean. Basically there's bigger producers that are regulated and smaller producers that are not really regulated, and that's how the industry built on this dichotomy.
And so this is back 2008. I actually drafted this initiative back in 2008, helped the group at the time get it on the ballot. There was an election. It was about a 60-40 vote at the time. It passed, but as Patricia said, it created this funky structure we have right now. But the actual initiative would have allowed for unlimited dispensaries and only regulated by municipalities, much like the adult use is right now. But what happened at that time was that they only allowed for 8 dispensaries, which are the more regulated entities. There was a competition to get them, heavy competition to get them, and then it created this parallel caregiver structure, and which is kind of right now we have about 2,600 caregivers around the state, doing everything from retail storefronts to large cultivation facilities to manufacturing. So that's how it's evolved, and that's where it came from.
So if you look at the Maine market, and I always try to seek for benchmarks in the nation. It's challenging. Some of the benchmarks you'll see later are, interestingly enough, Oregon and California for Maine for various reasons. But the Maine market is very complex, and here there's different shading of colors. But I keep calling it, fondly, the 50 Shades of Green, because there's a lot of nuances in there, from the black market, gray market, relaxed market, fully regulated, and there's a lot of confusion. So the way this is organized and structured in the legal market, soon you will have adult use, which will be, the licenses will be released this year, and then you have medical. Medical is a mix of the dispensaries, as Dan says, and then the caregivers. Caregivers have grown into a business. It was originally very small, intended to be a very small function, which you would have restricted number of patients, 5 patients. And then the 5 patients was not enough to sustain a business. And as we all know in this room, Maine doesn't have a lot of industries. and everybody wants to make a living, and this is a good way to create a sustained revenue. So the 5 patients there's a difference, people started interpreting it as there's long-term, short-term patients. So you always had 5 patients, but never the same ones at the same time. And then caregivers that were not intended to really create businesses started creating legit businesses that have slowly but surely started to be acknowledged and regulated, because when you start having employees and all of that, you need to do it in a regulated way.
So this is just a snapshot of the adult use program. Although there's been a medical program since 1999 and more of a robust medical program since 2009, there really hasn't been a lot of regulation around it other than the 8 dispensaries. So you have 8 dispensaries and you have 2,600 caregivers. So you can see how there hasn't been a lot of regulation. There hasn't been a lot of opportunity for municipalities to be able to have any control about what's going on in their communities. And that all changed about 2 years ago, where municipalities finally seized control of the situation, created opt-in both for the medical program and for the adult use program. And so this right here is is just, again, a snapshot of the adult use side. Medical is still actually trying to catch up. Ironically, I was talking to some folks beforehand, ironically, the medical program is dealing with our most vulnerable citizens, but it has the least amount of regulation, and there's still pressure to keep it that way because folks think they can be more self-regulated. We'll see how that works, but I think there's a real push to have a modern system of testing, labeling, packaging. There's still a lot of resistance right there, but it's coming in the adult use side, and we'll see if it brings along the medical side. So just quickly, the Office of Marijuana Policy, which was only developed a year ago and has done a tremendous amount of work, as Patricia was saying, over the last year, is within DAFs, which is one of our larger government agencies. There's 5 licenses in the adult use program: cultivation, retail, processing or manufacturing, testing, and nursery, which is really an offshoot of cultivation. The tax, there's a 10% sales tax versus a 5% sales tax on the medical side, and there'll be an excise tax, which is applied both at the cultivation side and at the manufacturing side when they're creating products. There's a tracking system that's been they've been trying to implement it, having some issues. It looks like it's stabilizing, but every plant will be tracked. And they're going to start with the adult use program as soon as the adult use program gets going, and then it'll move on to the medical program. As I was saying, there's opt-in. Municipalities have to choose to have marijuana, adult use marijuana, in their community at whatever level they want to. And you can only be 21 to enter into a facility. There's mandatory testing in this program. One issue with that, and we can talk more about it, and there might be other questions, is that this is a huge problem right now for this industry. And we've been warning them year after year after year after year that this is coming. It's going to be mandatory testing. What do you need for mandatory testing? We need labs. And there aren't any. And so there's one lab right now that is close, that could potentially come online by the summer. It's in Kennebunkport. There's a vote on it in April. And we'll see if the little town of Kennebunkport votes for having an adult use marijuana testing lab there. We'll see what happens. But if not, I guess there's 2 or 3 other ones that may or may not be ready. But we're going to have an entire industry, like at that picture that Patricia had up there, charging, and they have to squeeze through this tiny bottleneck of testing that may or may not happen, And so it's a real issue right now. Packaging, labeling, and advertising, very strict regulations around that. Again, they're trying to pull it back in for the medical side. Will be happening more slowly. And then, these are like any businesses. There's record keeping, inspection, high security issues that folks are going to have to follow. There's a Marijuana Advisory Commission that's going to be advising. I was actually nominated or named to that, and so I'm part of that. We've only met once So we'll see if that gets going to make some recommendations to government. And then lastly in this, that, in case anyone is wondering, it is legal to have cannabis. And you can have it, you can have it in your house, you can use it, but the limits are 3 plants that you can grow, and you can't have any more than, you can't transport any more than 2.5 ounces. So that's just a quick snapshot of that. This, as we talked about, the Office of Marijuana Policy, again, there was nothing there before.
There was 2 people.
There was 2 people there before. There were actually 2 people running it and then 2 inspectors to cover the entire state. Now they've ramped up to about 30. They've got somewhere between 5 and 8 inspectors that they're going to be coming online. The director is Eric Gunderson, who has, he worked closely in the Speaker's office and helped. There was an actual committee. I never thought I'd see this, having been around the legislature for a long time. There was a committee solely dedicated to marijuana for 2 years. He staffed that, and then when this position arose, he moved right into it. Scott Lever, actually, he came from the previous administration. He's a great guy. He's a good lawyer, and he has been a great addition there. And then there's a number of other folks, but they're fully staffed now, and they're actually continuing to hire, and they're reviewing hundreds of applications right now, and so which is keeping them busy.
So here is a summary of all the changes. So there's really 5 big ones, which, as I said, is going to be a very steep challenge for everybody that has been in the industry for a while and that has not been proactively managing up to this. There's going to be state-mandated track and trace software. It's called Metric, and the Office of Marijuana Policy has started roadshows in various municipalities to teach folks how to do it. So that means you're going to have to, you will need RFID tags, you will need to buy tags, you will have computers, scanners, all those things to think about. There will be mandatory testing. There will be finally adult use regulation and licensing. We'll talk about that a little bit. But there's also manufacturing regulation, medical regulation. So it's no longer this cottage industry where you can, in your kitchen or in your garage, or do a thing and it's really crafty. There are now regulations you need to abide by, and I can tell you have multiple binders because it's stacked up. It's pretty intense. So why is everybody trying to jump on the, marijuana bandwagon in Maine? As I mentioned earlier, well, Maine needs some economies to become really positive economic stimulus. So in 2019, the Portland Press Herald reported that there was over 111 million of legal marijuana that was bought in Maine.
Legal meaning medical.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is more than blueberries, maple syrup, apples, elvers, herring, and oysters combined. So there's an interesting national statistic there, which is for each dollar that is spent on the purchase of legal marijuana, the economic stimulus in the state is threefold. So for each dollar here, so you can assess that as of now with the medical industry, it's over $300 million of dollars that are invested in various other companies, because think about contractors, security, all these surrounding lawyers. There's a lot of dollars that are invested. Here, I was trying to project the trajectory of where this will go when it's medical and adult use, because we're becoming a dual track market. So it's predicted by 2022 to be a $265 million industry by ArcView, which is, as you can see, more than potatoes. Already it's very close from potatoes. It's only 60 million apart. And that will slowly but surely start tacking on the lobster industry.
If you think about it, we get with 35 million tourists come through Maine who haven't been able to really tap into this. That $111 million, that $111 million is going to grow a lot.
So the main opportunity will become 1 million of residents that are 21-year-old, and it's actually 39 million tourists. And statistics in Colorado show that 25% of tourists come to Colorado because of marijuana, and 15% of the tourists that come in Colorado will purchase actively marijuana. So that shows the impact this could have. As you can see, you know, this is a projection of what will become medical once you have adult use. Why would you bother to be in the medical track versus the adult use? And this has to do with how the policy is building the two program from a taxation perspective, from you know, also how much folks can access. For instance, in Colorado, a medical patient would be able to access more cannabis, tax-free, and so on and so forth. The two systems in Maine will not be that separated. So you can really look at and project that out of the 265 million that I mentioned to you in 2022, well, you know, only 15% will be the medical, and 85% of this will become the adult use. I'd like to qualify this dichotomy between the medical and you'll notice we don't use recreational. I call that adult use because I think between recreational and medical, there's an entire spectrum of folks and a reason why you would access marijuana that are not as simple as, you know, I have an acute condition or I really want to have a lot of fun. In the middle, you also have what I call the more holistic approach to life and wellness, which could be, you know, I have a lot of migraines and I want some herbal, try something herbal to take care of it. I have insomnia, like Corey, that had a problem, you know, like how do I access something that will improve my quality of life? So when you hear about, oh, it's legalized, it's recreational, you know, society tends to go to 20-year-old, maybe college students, having a lot of fun. I think it's much more complex when it comes to the segmentation of the market and what it will become. So looking at benchmarks, so this being in the cannabis industry is really, there's not really any benchmarks because it's such a new industry, so you have to triangulate your guesses. So the best states we can look towards to are California and Oregon. Oregon, because they have the same culture that Maine has about the farmers, the agriculture, and the, I would say this DNA about loving the cottage industry, and also, most importantly, they had no caps on licensing, which is the same approach Maine has taken. There's not really a lot of caps when it comes to the number of licensing that will be available. California is similar in the sense that the California marijuana market, a lot of stores opened, there was not necessarily a lot of regulation, and regulation came later on, and then that created a lot of backpedaling, I would say, and some operations were shut down, some had, you know, inventory that was, you know, packaging regulation would change every 2 months, and so on and so forth. So these are two states which we can use as a benchmark. I've also looked into Colorado because Colorado is the very one state, the first and the one we should always look at, the beacon of all learning, I would say. And I've tried to project what is this going to mean from you know, a business perspective, but also if you bring it back to the population over 21, what is this going to look like from how many stores? You know, that's something we see a lot in municipalities. You know, how many stores, how many licenses, what is the right number, and how can I figure that out? So if you project from those states and the statistics, right, in the market, you get to the fact that in Maine you could have between 180 and 241 stores, just the stores. That's a lot of stores. As of now, there's probably close to, I would say, yeah, we're probably already in the 200, you know, number of stores, but there might be even more if you take, you know, as of now, the dispensaries and all the caregiver storefronts. So it's a lot of stores, and, you know, where will they be? That is becoming a legit, bona fide competitive market. Speaking of competition, if you look at the price per gram wholesale, because that's also an industry, you know, there will be B2B. We tend to always see it as B2C, but it's really important to think about wholesale and the dynamics that will be feeding this. Maine, as of now, the going price is $4 per gram wholesale. But look at the other markets. California is at $243, Colorado is at $193, and Oregon is at $133. So that means you need, if you want to have a sustained business, built on cannabis, you really need to have a business plan. You need to start looking into reducing cost of goods, thinking about optimizing labor, optimizing energy. If you're a producer, it's a very high energy. So how do you, minimize this cost and so on and so forth. So as cannabis is becoming finally something you can access widely, it's becoming like any other industry. It will be a commodity and you have to fight for every single penny. So where is Maine as of now? And Dan has the pulse on the most recent statistics, but these are all the licenses. These are statistics from the Office of Marijuana Policy that were submitted. So in yellow on the left, you have all the licenses that were received, and in gray, it's the one that were deemed complete. And from the deemed complete, then they're being reviewed. It's a very complex system where you have to first be conditionally approved by the state, then you need to be approved by the municipality. Once you're approved by the municipality, you go back to the state to be finally approved. So it's a complicated dance that might take a while.
And although that they've been deemed complete, I don't think anyone has actually received a conditional license from the state to bring back to the municipality. It's coming. It's very close. They're very close.
And then municipalities, so on the right, we mapped out the Maine Municipal Association as a good tracker, up-to-date tracker of municipalities are opting in, and we've mapped this out there. Every municipality is doing it very differently, so this is adding a level of complexity. It's really municipality by municipality that you need to adjust to their criteria, and we see that we're discussing that about security, odor control, all of that. Everybody is doing it a little bit differently.
Can you keep it there for 1 sec? So look at that map for a second. So that's adult use opt-in right now. There's a lot of space there, right? And I think that space that you see will keep the medical market around for maybe longer than in other states because of this opt-in, because folks there are they're using cannabis, but there's not going to be a place. They're not going to drive, from all the way from southern Aroostook County all the way to Bangor, or even all the way up to Presque Isle. They're going to have local. So there's going to be medical around for a while to fill in those gaps, just like they filled in the gaps where the dispensaries couldn't reach.
Whoops, sorry. So a couple of, 5 realities that will shape this industry, and we should account for as business, leaders. And first, administrative backlog of application. That's what I was describing, this very complicated process. It's complicated and long. So when you embark on an adventure and you decide to do a startup or work with the company, ask for business plans, ask for cap tables, see if they can last the distance, because you can realistically have to wait a year and a half before having to be able to really run your business. The medical market will decline, as I mentioned. There will be, if you look at the other markets, the benchmark I referred to earlier, there will be an explosion of the demand on the onset that will not be met by demand, so the prices are going to go up. And then by the time everybody ramps up production, there will be a glut and all the pricing will collapse. So people should think long term. You have to be there to sustain the distance, and it's going to be a price highly, highly competitive market. And then there will be the laboratory bottleneck. I mean, think about those hundreds of licenses that are currently being reviewed by the state where, well, if Kennebunk says no and there's no lab in Maine and everything has to be tested hand game, you need to wait for someone or a municipality to have a lab. So there's a lot of what ifs in developing this industry. And then there's another interesting conundrum, which is the hemp versus marijuana, and where's my CBD coming from, Dan?
So we thought we'd just touch on this. This is another long topic, and we can talk about all these for hours, and this is another one. But hemp, and you just heard we have some CBD products here, I guess. So is that legal? And it's very hard to understand that. And the difference is, right, so hemp CBD also comes from a cannabis plant. But it's a cannabis plant that has 0.3% THC. THC is the intoxicating quality of, or intoxicating substance that's in cannabis. You'll see, and that's 18%, that's high, you know, that's, you know, the percentage of THC in cannabis that's sold is, you know, it fluctuates. I mean, that's probably a high number, but just we wanted to show the example that the point is that hemp is not supposed to be intoxicating. It's supposed to be more of a, from a head perspective, it's supposed to be more of a body experience, right? And so, in 2014, the federal farm bill passed, and it allowed for there to be hemp production in the United States, but they had to be in these pilot programs. And these pilot programs within a state, they'd be run by the state's Department of Agriculture, and it would require folks who wanted to grow hemp to team up with either a nonprofit or a university. Well, Maine went ahead and started a hemp program here that didn't have pilot programs, so we immediately non-conformed, and it struggled a bit. We still had hemp production going on, but it struggled. 2018, just a couple years ago, this really legalized hemp. It really ended the prohibition of hemp and ended it being necessary for these state pilot programs. Maine got a little closer to being in line with it, but not quite. And then and so right now it is legal to grow hemp, and it is legal to kind of ship hemp around the country to some extent. But CBD, okay, is a substance that is extracted from the cannabis plant, and you can get CBD from, you know, cannabis that's in the medical marijuana program or the adult use cannabis program, you know, from high THC. But you really have to. The way that it's legal is that if it's under 0.3%, and that's been a big sticking point right now. So right now for CBD, it is. And it's been very confusing for those of you in the retail industry right now. The state has kind of been very schizophrenic about how they've dealt with. First, it was, the state came out with a memo about this time last year that said, okay, you can't have CBD in food. You can't do it. You can't have it. And so all of a sudden, you know, we had folks contacting us, what are we supposed to do? Should we take it off our shelves? We connected with the Department of Agriculture, the CDC, the AG's office. They said, well, we're really not going to enforce it, but this is what the law is. So, but people got scared. People wanted to follow the law. So then there was a bill passed that allowed for there to be CBD in food. That was great. Well, then all of a sudden it became, well, you can't get the CBD or the hemp from out of state. That was the next memo that came out in about the spring of last year. Well, everyone panicked again because a lot of stores bring their CBD and hemp products in from out of state. There was another bill passed to fix that. And so everyone got comfortable again. And then at the beginning of the fall, another memo came out of the CDC and the Department of Agriculture and the AG's office that said, okay, you can bring in CBD into the state, you can bring in hemp into the state, and you can grow it here, and as long as you produce these products, this food here. But you can't bring in CBD food into food in CBD, whether it's coffee, whether it's whatever. You can't. It has to be produced here. So that's where it currently stands right now. There was actually a bill heard this week on that, trying to allow for CBD products to be brought into Maine. This is something that, you know, I think a lot of folks who come into the Wellness Connection, they're asking for this because it's just another. It's in the gradient of cannabis products. This has low THC, some have high THC, but it has the same kind of other components in it that people are looking for. So there's still incredible confusion right now. Under the FDA right now, it is illegal really for Maine people to put CBD in food right now. But the Maine has non-conformed federally, like we've non-conformed on the marijuana side. And now we're pushing back with the state, and they say, well, you can't bring the CBD food products into the state because the FDA is going to come in. Well, our point to them was that if they're going to come in, they would be coming in right now because it's already what we're doing here is illegal. So we're in this crazy federal conundrum right now, continuing to be, and it's as much on the CBD side as it is on the cannabis side.
And that's another line of product where there's not really any regulation for, testing, labeling. So what is on packaging? If you're a store, be very discerning about what you decide to put on your shelf, because you must. I don't know if you read, but in the Portland Press Herald a couple of months back, there was the story of this lady. She was buying CBD products. She had chronic pain, and she was a temp at Maine Health, and all of a sudden she's offered a full-time position, and she gets tested for drug, and oh my God, she's testing positive. How is this for THC? So she cannot get the job. How is this possible? She's only accessing CBD product. Well, that's where testing and looking at the labels and understanding really what you're getting and asking all the questions is really critical for all of us as business leaders, but also as individual and consumer. Be very careful about what you're doing.
So I think this, just to sum it up, there's a very minimal enforcement going on around this, but yet people need to be careful. The one issue that the FDA will come after you for, the AG's office will come after you for, is if you're claiming therapeutic benefits from CBD. They don't want to see that, not until it's gone through the FDA process right now. There are some drugs on the market out there with CBD in it that have been approved by the FDA, and that's why they feel like they have oversight over it now. And they claim that they're coming. It's coming. These regulations are coming. We'll believe it, and they're right. Standards are coming. We'll believe it when we see it. Okay, so just want to give folks, from an employment perspective, I've given some talks as well on employment law around this, and we'll just hit a couple topics here if anyone's interested. We thought it might be interesting. So, anti-discrimination. What can you do with an employee who's using marijuana? And there's two parts to it, right? There, now that we have adult use, there's a medical patient who has some protections under this, and then there's an adult use patient, an adult use consumer, who we really should be treating like someone who goes home and drinks beer or likes a cocktail. That's really how we should be treating these two. There's some exceptions for use around, especially on the medical side. Professional negligence. You can't be operating a crane. Even if you have a medical ailment. Schools, there's issues around schools, public places, motor vehicles, law enforcement officers, and commercial driver's licenses. There's still issues around that. And even though there are protections, there are exceptions there. So it's a lot of words here, but this is under the medical law. There's two. There's this one and then another one. I'll just read it really quickly.
Which one you are?
This one, yeah. So rights of persons or entities acting pursuant to this chapter. This basically gives somebody the right, if you are and so this is under the medical law. If you are a patient who's been a doctor thinks this is good for you, and that there's no prescription, that's a federal term, but they've certified that you should be using this, then there are some protections involved. So a person whose conduct is authorized under this chapter may not be denied any right or privilege or be subjected to arrest, prosecution, penalty, or disciplinary action, including but not limited to a civil penalty or disciplinary action by a business or occupational or professional licensing board, even a licensing board, or bureau for lawfully engaging in conduct involving the medical use of marijuana authorized under this chapter. That's real protection. And this is about a school, employer, or landlord may not discriminate, okay? So, go back one, sorry. So here, so this is even a landlord, right? If you have a property, you have to treat them like everyone. If you restrict, you allow someone to grow tomatoes, you should allow them to grow, as long as they're not, infringing on other folks, to grow a plant in their apartment. If smoking provisions go both ways. If you don't allow smoking in your building, you can't also smoke cannabis there. So it's some issues there. Employers, landlords, schools, same way. So again, that's on the medical side. On the adult use side, let's go through this for a moment. So employment policies. Except as otherwise provided in the medical law, an employer, number one, so this is about in the workplace, is not required to permit or accommodate the use, consumption, possession, trade, display, transportation, sale, or cultivation of marijuana or marijuana products in the workplace. Okay, so you're not required to. Just because it's illegal doesn't mean you can bring a beer to work. You can have a cocktail on your desk. You can't do that just because it's legal. But then again, just because someone did it on the weekend shouldn't be an issue as long as it's not affecting them at the workplace. Number two, policies around marijuana use. So an employer may enact and enforce workplace policies restricting the use of marijuana and marijuana products by employees in the workplace or while otherwise engaged in activities within the course and scope of employment. So you can have policies around this, not using it at work. And three, discipline. An employer may discipline employees who are under the influence of marijuana in the workplace or while otherwise engaged in activities. So you're allowed to, again, if folks, and we're using, so go one forward. So what lessons do we take from this? All employers should have an impairment standards anyway, whether it's alcohol, whether it's prescription drugs, whether it's cannabis. And so from a medical perspective, you should really treat it like a prescription, is what we tell our employer clients. And from an adult use side, the analogy is alcohol. Treat it like how you would govern alcohol.
And the real thing when you have a workforce, is, believe it or not, I mean, I also have to work with this, even though we're a marijuana company, we still have to have the same, work with our councils to make all those standards and regulation in-house for our team. It's not because we're a marijuana company that everybody's smoking everywhere all the time, right? So the trick here is really, are folks impaired? The reason is not really your problem. Are they impaired on alcohol, on oxycodone or something? This is not really your problem. Your problem is really, and your focus should be about being able to pinpoint there's an impairment, and from the impairment have very clear standard operating procedures on how this would evolve from there. But be careful about making assumption or jumping to conclusion, because this is not a prudent way of handling it.
Our second point here is that there's really no valid way to test for impairment for cannabis right now. It's probably coming sometimes, but the technology is not there around this. So you may test someone, they may be positive, but it could have happened a week ago. So what can you do as an employer? And I think Patricia was just alluding to some of these. Performance-based expectations, just keep documents, keep files, obviously, of employees. And again, it's all about impairment in the workplace. And then lastly, for accommodating, you're, again, not required to accommodate, again, this on the adult use side, but you're not prohibited from accommodating as well. So consider it. If you have someone with disabilities who's considering, that this is helping them, consider accommodating it.
Aha. So that's our conclusion. If you didn't get the big message here, is be ready for what you're not ready for. And that's, again, I was saying, how do you lead a company in this industry where nothing is really charted, or really, ask me what my 5-year business plan is. Well, if I'm lucky, if I can really have the next 6 months solidified because of all those changes that keep coming at you. So that's how I describe at best, working in the cannabis industry. It's like a roller coaster. You're a little apprehensive, but you want to go and you don't know. You get in the little cart, you buckle up, you're ready, you're braced for it. You go all the way at the top, you're screaming, you're scared to death, and you're doing the other loop, and at the end, well, you're doing it again because it was so fun. So that's what working in the cannabis industry looks like and feel like, and that's probably what this year will be. There's a lot of changes. You know, if we come back here in 6 months, we might tell you like yet another, you know, different stories. So let's just be ready and enjoy the ride.
And I know for this is the chamber. Thanks, Kim. And what do you? I mean, mostly it seems like from a business perspective, you're looking for predictability, stable regulatory, and that's what I do a lot of my time is trying to maintain some predictability for business regulations. And what Patricia's just showed you in this industry is just it's crazy how folks are trying to build businesses, and there's just this. But people are pushing the envelope. You know, they're kind of creating their own roller coasters as they go along at the same time because folks keep pushing the envelope here, and government is trying to keep up, and it's been quite a ride. So
Does anyone have any questions?
Oh.
Thanks, Kim. So, Dan, is there a precedent for trying to create an industry at a state level that is, for lack of a better term, illegal under a federal doctrine? Have there been other industries where it's been sort of pushed from bottom up to the to make the federal government act like this, or no?
You know, it's a good question. I think the big one obviously is alcohol. You know, from Prohibition back. You know, I think everybody back in the 30s, there were speakeasies everywhere, and people really didn't. You know, it was kind of selective enforcement. There wasn't a lot of enforcement around it, and I think and so that came from it never stopped, and so I think the states drove that. It continued to happen. But what's so unique here is that there's actually state regulation. There's non-conforming. I mean, that was just kind of happening under this. But we have state taxation. They're flaunting, you know, the government prohibition right now. But I think what's interesting is that the federal government just hasn't recognized what's out there. I mean, look, 74% of the population, of the United States population, is living in areas where it's legal. And
so the next,
yeah.
That's actually to the next question that I have then. So with the finances, I know that one of the big issues right now is the banking system, and basically how is the industry getting around not being able to use the banking system, or are they just using the banking system and everybody's sort of looking the other way?
I will take that one.
Yeah.
We're not getting around. I mean, we're lucky enough, for instance, in the states like Maine, where we currently do work with banks. We have a Maine chartered banks and 2 credit unions, so we're not going around this. There's partners, and there's a lot of programs like Safe Harbor out of Colorado that is providing a lot of compliance systems for credit unions or banks that want to enter the industry. So the banking industry is really embracing, trying to find solution for the cannabis industry, and there's more and more of that. There are states that are not that progressive. If you look at Hawaii, they have a medical industry that has access to no banking. So unfortunately, if you're a dispensary in Hawaii, you need to bring cash in the backpack to California, which I think it's making progress. The Safe Banking Act was passed federally earlier this summer, which is opening the gates to...
Not fully. Only one of the houses.
It's progress.
Yes, yeah.
I take it.
Yeah.
Which is making a lot of that. I mean, that's one of the things in this industry, the idea that we're all working off cash and we're not sophisticated in that way, which is not necessarily true. We work with banks. We have alternative payment methods for folks who want to, pay from your phone and things like that. So it's important to keep that in mind. But yes, I would say it's really, as soon as the banking becomes, not being federally legal creates these ways where people have to get around, and I think it's a detriment to the industry overall. But banking is really trying to catch up, which is good.
And let me just take a half step back there too, is that federally, there is some authority to do what's happening on the state level federally. In each of the last number of continuing resolutions, there has been provisions that have been directed at the Department of Justice, directing them not to use their prosecutorial discretion in not going after state-compliant medical marijuana. Not as much on the adult use side, but for medical marijuana, and that has been it's been supported by U.S. district court cases. And on the banking side, so there are banking regulations out there that don't tell them that they can't do it, but there's just a lot of regulations that the banks have to follow. We're actually advising a number of banks on this. We spoke at the Credit Union Compliance Conference this year. We're helping them get there. There's just it's a lot more that banks and credit unions have to track to be able to lend into both the cannabis and the hemp markets, but it's happening, but slowly.
And where it's a detriment to the industry is if we can find banking solution for deposits and day-to-day operations, access to loans and capital for equipment or improvements is really a challenge. And unfortunately, that opened the gate for a lot of what I called predatory financing models and schemes, because then, if you want to, buy equipment or some of these, automation of hemp processing, for instance, could be easily $250,000 or $500,000. Well, where do you find the money? And I've seen some pretty outrageous loan proposals out there. So that's the next frontier, being able to regulate and have transparent access to capital for investing in companies.
And one of the things in Maine right now is that we have at least for the time being, we have some residency requirements around the adult use markets and some in the medical side. So, as far as raising capital, you're gonna have to raise most of your, the majority of your capital from the state of Maine. And as this industry grows, there's just not going to be enough capital.
I just had a quick question. In working with caregivers over the last year from an insurance perspective, they seem much more optimistic about the percentage of medical use than you do on your slide, just based on the taxation alone. So I was just kind of wondering what you're basing your 15.85% on.
I'm basing it on the statistic that have been released by both ArcView and New Frontier, as well as Marijuana Business Daily. So these are statistical numbers from other markets and models.
Other states, right? So this is exactly what's happened in other states. But I think there may be some optimism there, because as you saw on that map, there's a lot of space in the state of Maine where we're a very low our population density is low, and the adult use opt-ins are going to be in more of the population centers in the more liberal communities. So there are a host of other communities that are not. They're going to, and so on the medical side too, although we have municipal opt-in, municipalities can't say that a caregiver can't operate in their town. They're protected. So they can't have a store downtown, but they can still operate from their home. And so that will continue for a while. And I think that's probably why there's some
I would
optimism.
agree with the concept of being optimistic, but with a good dose of reality. When you have towns that are opting in and you have all of a sudden 7 stores in a 1-mile strip, yeah, you can be optimistic about the market, but you need to be the best store in the street to make sure this is going to work in a sustainable manner. So it's optimistic with a good dose of reality and a very good plan, yes. I want to believe in that.
Well, thank you both.